Ever feel like, the whole world's gone digital lock and key on us?
Yeah.
You're not alone. Today, we're unlocking the mystery behind a global security heavyweight, ISO/IEC 27001.
Yeah, it's not just some techie buzzword, though.
Right.
Think of it as, like, the gold standard for protecting information, no matter where you are in the world.
Right, because whether we realize it or not, information security impacts, well, all of us.
It does.
So we're diving deep into what this standard is all about and why it matters.
What's fascinating is that ISO 27001 isn't just about, like, building walls around your data. It's about creating a system,
Okay.
an ISMS as it's called, to manage risks proactively.
Okay, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's break that down. What exactly is an ISMS? Sounds kind of like something out of a spy movie.
It's not that dramatic,
Okay.
but it is about strategy. Imagine trying to build a house with just a jumbled toolbox. You might have all the tools, but without a plan, things get messy. An ISMS is that plan for your information.
So instead of randomly putting up security cameras, you're saying there needs to be a well-thought-out strategy behind it all.
Exactly. And that's where ISO 27001 comes in. It provides a framework to identify those weak points in your data house, patch them up, and make sure you're prepared for whatever curveballs come your way.
It's like having a security system, but for all your valuable data, not just your physical belongings. Makes you wonder why we don't all have one.
You're not wrong. But for organizations, it's not just a nice to have. It's often a must-have. Think about the sensitive data companies handle. Customer details, financial records, trade secrets. It's critical to have a robust system in place.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What does ISO 27001 actually require organizations to do?
First and foremost, it's all about being proactive. The standard pushes organizations to identify those potential data leaks before they become a PR nightmare.
So no more waiting for a breach to happen and then scrambling to fix it.
Exactly. It's about understanding your vulnerabilities, assessing the potential damage, and then taking those proactive steps to mitigate those risks. This might mean implementing new security measures, strengthening existing ones, or even deciding to avoid certain risks altogether.
Kind of like a risk-benefit analysis, but for data. So it's not just about tech, right? It's about strategy and decision-making at its core.
You hit the nail on the head. And once those risks are identified, it's time to build up your defenses. ISO 27001 emphasizes having a comprehensive set of controls. And we're not just talking about fancy firewalls here.
Okay, so what kind of controls are we talking about? Paint me a picture.
Think of it as a multi-layered shield protecting your data. We're talking everything from physical security measures like locked server rooms to training employees on how to spot phishing emails, and yes, even making sure your software is up to date.
So it's not just one thing. It's about having all these layers work together seamlessly.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Those controls cover 4 key domains: organizational, people, physical, and technological.
4 domains. Sounds like we're about to unlock a whole new level of complexity. But before we do, let's take a quick pause and dive deeper into those domains in part 2 of our exploration into the world of ISO/IEC 27001. Welcome back to our deep dive into ISO 27001. Before we paused, we were standing at the gate of those 4 key domains: organizational, people, physical, and technological, that make up this robust security framework. Let's unlock these domains, shall we?
Absolutely. Let's imagine each domain as a corner of your data fortress.
Okay.
Starting with organizational, it's all about setting the tone from the top down.
Yep.
This means having clear security policies, assigning responsibilities, and making sure everyone in the organization understands the importance of protecting sensitive information.
So it's like laying the foundation for a strong security culture. But what about those people controls? After all, even with the best tech in place, human error can still be a weak link. Right.
You're absolutely right. That's why training and awareness programs are paramount. You want employees to be your first line of defense, not a vulnerability.
Right.
This means educating them on things like password hygiene, recognizing phishing scams, and reporting suspicious activity.
It's like that old saying, knowledge is power. Empower your people with the right knowledge and they become, well, walking, talking security advocates.
Precisely. Now on to our next domain. Physical. Think. Locked doors, security cameras, restricted access to server rooms, the works. It's about securing your physical assets just as rigorously as you would your digital ones.
So no more propping, open the door to the server room with a chair.
Definitely not. Every entry point, every piece of hardware needs to be considered.
Right.
And last but not least, we have our technological domain. which is probably what most people think of when they hear cybersecurity. We're talking firewalls, antivirus software, intrusion detection systems, encryption, the whole nine yards.
So basically, all the techie tools that help us build that impenetrable digital fortress around our data. It sounds like ISO 27001 really does cover all the bases. But with all these controls in place, isn't there a risk of things becoming too rigid, too inflexible?
That's a great point, and that's where those four key principles we touched upon earlier come into play. Remember, it's not enough to just set up these controls and call it a day. You need to make sure they're actually working, that they're adapted to your specific needs, and that they evolve alongside the threat landscape.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of deal. It's an ongoing process, which is where that continual improvement principle comes in.
Right, got it. Think of it like tending a garden.
Okay.
You wouldn't just plant some seeds and walk away hoping for the best. You'd water them, weed them, make sure they're getting enough sunlight. Continual improvement is all about regularly reviewing your ISMS, identifying areas for improvement, and adapting to new challenges.
So it's about staying one step ahead of those pesky weeds.
Yeah,
Or in this case, those ever-evolving cyber threats.
exactly. And this is especially important as new technologies emerge.
Right.
Think. Artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, all these advancements create new opportunities, but also new vulnerabilities. A robust ISMS needs to be flexible enough to adapt to these changes.
Speaking of adapting to change, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about how organizations can prove they're actually following these principles, that they're not just talking the talk, but actually walking the walk. That's where certification comes in, right?
You're on the right track. While any organization can choose to implement the ISO 27001 framework, achieving certification provides that external validation, that stamp of approval that says, we've been audited by the best and we meet the highest standards.
It's like earning a black belt in information security.
I like that analogy. But just like earning a black belt takes time and dedication, so does achieving ISO 27001 certification.
So there's a whole process involved. It's not just filling out a form and getting a gold star sticker.
Definitely not. We'll dive into the ins and outs of that certification process right after this quick break.
And we're back, ready to demystify that ISO 27001 certification process. It sounds like earning a badge of honor in the cybersecurity world.
You could say that it's a rigorous process,
Yeah.
but for organizations serious about their security posture, it's worth its weight in gold.
So walk us through it. What are the steps involved in actually getting certified?
Well, it usually starts with choosing an accredited certification body, kind of like picking the right referee for a big game.
Okay.
They're the ones who will put your ISMS through its paces.
Makes sense. You want to make sure it's a fair and impartial assessment. So once you've got your referee, what happens next?
Then comes the audit itself, which often happens in stages.
Okay.
The first stage is like a preliminary checkup, making sure you've got all your ducks in a row. The auditors will review your documentation, your policies, your risk assessments, that kind of thing.
So it's about making sure you've actually done your homework before you get to the big exam.
Precisely. And if everything looks good in stage 1, then it's on to stage 2, which is the real deep dive. This is where the auditors really roll up their sleeves and scrutinize your ISMS in action.
Oh,
They'll conduct interviews, examine records, observe your security practices firsthand.
It sounds intense. Are they lurking in server rooms, checking for that chair, propping the door open?
Well, maybe not literally, but you get the idea. They're looking for proof that you're not just talking the talk, but actually walking the walk when it comes to information security.
So it's about ensuring those controls we talked about earlier are actually embedded in the organization's DNA, not just something gathering dust on a shelf.
Yeah, exactly. And if an organization passes this stage 2 audit with flying colors, they're awarded the ISO 27001 certification. But here's the thing. It's not a one-and-done deal.
Ah, there's the catch. I had a feeling the continual improvement principle would come back into play.
You know it. To maintain that coveted certified status, organizations need to undergo regular surveillance audits. Think of it like those regular checkups you have with your doctor just to make sure everything's still in tip-top shape.
So it's about staying ahead of the curve, adapting to new threats, and constantly improving your security posture. It sounds like a lot of work, but then again, the stakes have never been higher when it comes to protecting information, right?
Absolutely. In today's hyper-connected world, information is a valuable currency, and organizations that don't prioritize its protection are putting themselves at risk. ISO 27001 provides a robust framework for navigating these complex waters. and emerging from the other side with greater resilience and peace of mind.
It's about creating that culture of security we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
embedding it in the very fabric of the organization. And while not every organization needs to go through the formal certification process, understanding the principles behind ISO 27001 can be a game changer for anyone, even in our personal lives.
You said it. It's about being mindful of the data we share, the devices we use, the passwords we choose. Every little step we take to protect our information, both personally and professionally, contributes to a safer and more secure digital world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into ISO 27001, I'm left with this thought. It's not just about ticking boxes or complying with regulations. It's about understanding that information security is an ongoing journey, one that requires constant vigilance, adaptation, and a commitment to always staying one step ahead.
Well said. And perhaps the most important takeaway is that information security is not just the responsibility of IT professionals or security experts. It's something we all need to be aware of and actively participate in.
Absolutely. So to our listeners, as you navigate this ever-evolving digital landscape, remember that knowledge is power. And understanding the principles we've discussed today can empower you to make smarter, safer decisions about your information.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of ISO 27001. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay secure.